Let's talk about running backs. You should start or sit in week 12 of the fantasy football season. We've got 4 teams on bye this week: the Broncos, Chargers, Dolphins, Commanders. So you will be without RJ Harvey, Vidal, Achan, and Chris Rodriguez. But don't worry, in today's video, I'm going to rank every single running back. We're going to talk about their matchups and how I project this week going. And of course, there are time codes if you want to go to a specific matchup. Let's go to Thursday Night Football. Bills at Texans, 43.5 point over under. The Bills are favored by almost a touchdown, even though it's in Houston. It makes sense. Let's be honest at this point. CJ Stroud is set to miss another game, so it will be Davis Mills versus Josh Allen. James Cook is the only true must start in this matchup. Yes, it is a difficult matchup, but when you're a part of an offense like this, James Cook goes into your lineup every single week. I don't care if he's playing the Cleveland Browns every week of the season. You're still putting him into your lineup and expecting him to have a good fantasy day. He's been fantastic so far this year, my RB9. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, Woody Marks is a really interesting case because, as you guys know, if you're fans of this show, I am a Woody Marks guy. I love Woody Marks. And that is really less about the player, but more about the fact that you could have picked him up off the waiver wire for free and he's a flexible option for you. Well, that's what I view him as this week. A low-end RB2, my RB22. This is a great matchup against the Buffalo Bills. We all just saw what Sean Tucker did to them last week. I mean, every single week, there's a different running back going off against the Buffalo Bills defense, and I think it is Woody Marks' turn. If anyone in Houston's going to do it, it's going to be Woody because it's back-to-back weeks where they've completely given him the backfield. 46 snaps, just 18 for Nick Chubb, 19 total opportunities. Now, unfortunately, that offensive line in Houston is just terrible. I mean, even versus Tennessee last week, it was a great matchup. And every single time Woody touched the ball, there was a defender in his face. So he didn't do much with those opportunities, just 6 points. But from a usage perspective, this is what you dream about picking up off the waiver wire. It's exactly what you would hope to see with your waiver wire pickup. So we are going to go ahead and label him a spot start this week. It's a great matchup. He is dominating opportunities. But of course, anything is possible. All right, let's jump to the Jets at the Ravens. This is the start of the Sunday slate. No more international games this year. It is in Baltimore, and the Ravens are favored by 13.5 points, almost 2 touchdowns. That is the largest spread of this week, by the way. So the Ravens are the heaviest favorites of the entire Week 12 slate, 44.5 point over under. Now, let's talk about the Jets first here, because Breece Hall, I actually think, gets a little bit of a tick this week because the Jets have benched Justin Fields and they are now bringing in Tyrod Taylor. Now, that might be confusing for some of you guys. Maybe you have a differing opinion. That's completely fine. But ultimately, when you are so one-dimensional and teams know that you can't throw to save your life, it does make the run game really difficult to be successful, right, on the ground in that scenario. So Tyrod Taylor is a competent backup. I actually think the Jets are going to be a better offense, and they're going to have a better threat through the air, which is going to help establish the run game. He's my RB15 this week. Ravens are a top 10 matchup for your running back so far in 2025. They have been getting healthier, but still, you can't attack them on the ground. On the opposite side there with the Baltimore Ravens, Derrick Henry is going to be a must start. It feels like this is finally the game where Derrick Henry gets into the end zone. It's just a feeling, but at this point, the offense is looking a little bit better against Cleveland last week. That was a little bit of a divisional, things happen differently in divisional games. But Derrick Henry, my RB12, I am confidently playing him. Obviously, as we all know, this team lost their 2 best defensive players, Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner. I think the Ravens have a huge old day, and there's a reason that they are the largest spread of the week. I think that heavily favors Derrick Henry. Okay, let's jump to the Steelers at the Bears. 44.5 point over under, okay? Bears are favored by 3 points, and it's in Chicago. We do have to talk about the Steelers backfield because at the time of recording this, I'm not 100% sure if Jaylen Warren plays or not, but I will give you every scenario so you are equipped. So, in the scenario that Jaylen Warren plays, which is what you're seeing in my rankings right now on the screen, he is my RB18, a must-start tag, which means doesn't matter where you are, you're putting him into your lineup at minimum as a flex. The Bears are a great matchup, 8th best matchup for your fantasy running back when you adjust for schedule. And then I wouldn't really trust Kenneth Gainwell. He'd be a much bigger risk to play in that event. However, if Jaylen Warren is out, I'm going to rank Kenneth Gainwell as my RB18. He would just straight away take away that ranking from Jaylen Warren. We have seen multiple times where Kenneth Gainwell, when given the opportunity, has been dominant for fantasy football. Do you guys remember the international game in week 4 where Jaylen Warren was out? Well, Kenneth Gainwell had over 30 fantasy points, dominated, and looked incredible doing so. Last week, Jaylen Warren has an injury. Guess who steps in? Kenneth Gainwell looks dominant. Another game over 30 PPR fantasy points. So, look, if there is no Jaylen Warren, I think Kenneth Gainwell could be one of the best sneaky starts of the entire week against the Bears. Obviously, there's more to the story here because Aaron Rodgers, we don't know if he's playing on Sunday. They're trying to determine whether he can grip the football. He was described as 50-50 for this Sunday. You'll learn more over the course of the week. And obviously, that's because of a slight break in his left wrist. So it's not his throwing hand. That's good news. And clearly, this offense wouldn't be as good without Aaron Rodgers. We can recognize that. On the Bears side of this, I am still going to start DeAndre Swift. Yes, it was a disappointing game last week. I understand where you guys are coming from. But still, he ended up with 22 total touches and played over 55% of the snaps. So Kyle Monangai is going to be annoying. You can't start Monangai with any sort of confidence. He's going to be annoying, but Swift is still the guy here. So we're going to label him a must start in what should be a competitive game. Okay, let's go to Patriots at Bengals. So, as we all know, TreVeyon Henderson has been on what we would all call a heater. I think we can all agree on that, right? 2 weeks ago, had 140 plus yards, went crazy, over 10 yards per carry. Last week, no Stevenson again on Thursday Night Football. In that game, he had 58 snaps, had 19 carries, 5 targets, 24 total opportunities. And I want you guys to keep in mind that TreVeyon Henderson was one of my official my guys this year. So that's looked completely stupid this entire year. I want you to know that before I say what I'm about to say, because I love TreVeyon Henderson. Clearly, he was effective. He was efficient last week. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground. 1 through the air, was a really good weapon out of the air as well. However, I just do not believe that Mike Vrabel is going to walk away from Ramondre Stevenson. So if Ramondre Stevenson is healthy, they are both startable flex options RB2s, okay? Now, why would I say they're both options this week? Well, I say that because they face the Cincinnati Bengals. That is by far this year the best matchup for your fantasy running backs. It's not even close. So if both of them are playing, I do expect Henderson to have a bigger role than what he had before Stevenson's injury. However, I still think Ramondre is going to lead the way as a starter. He probably still has the goal line role, the short yardage role, and hopefully for Henderson's sake, they start to use him the way they should have this entire year, which is as a satellite back and giving him, let's say, 8 to 12 carries per game. So I think both of these guys have a chance to really shine in this game. Now, I do prefer Henderson by 1 spot, but they're both startable options. I can't wait to play Stevenson in the leagues where I have him against this defense. But in the event that Stevenson is out, which I don't anticipate, obviously TreVeyon Henderson to the moon, right? He would be my RB8 this week. He might even be a top 5 running back in my rankings this week when all is said and done. Now, on the opposite side, Chase Brown is my RB13. He is a must start. And it's not so much about what Chase Brown is doing on the ground, because this Bengals offense, it really struggles to get the ground game going. But it's more about what he's doing through the air. I mean, each and every week, we're seeing Chase Brown with, by the way, a receiver room of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and all these great names. You're seeing him get consistent targets. That is the Joe Flacco effect. For example, last week, he had 7 targets on 18 carries as well. So he touched the ball 25 times. Anytime you touch the ball that much, you are going to be a must start for me, especially when you're getting targets. And if you're in any PPR type of formats, then you should be starting him because of the safe floor that he presents. Guys, he had 8 targets this week. He had 14 targets last week. Yes, they're not going to get much going on the ground, but when they're down in this game, which is the most likely outcome, Chase Brown's going to get plenty of targets. Okay, let's go to the 5th game of the week, Giants at Lions. 49.5 point over under. A lot of points expected in this one. This is tied with 3 other matchups for the second largest over under of the week. Lions are heavy favorites, over 10 points. They are favorites in this game. Let's start off with them. Of course, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be in your lineups. We all agree on that. There's just no debating it. He's going to be in every single lineup in fantasy football this week. What we need to talk about is David Montgomery. David Montgomery's role has consistently fallen away this year. 7 touches in this last game against the Eagles. Now, it is fair to talk about the context, which is that the Lions, very rarely do they ever do this, but they were down the entirety of the game. So it made a lot more sense to deploy Jahmyr Gibbs than it did David Montgomery. But his role is certainly fluctuating each and every week. And if the Lions are ever down in a game, he is a benchable player. And this game against the Giants, though, I do feel like you can start him as a flex, okay? A low-end RB2, high-end RB3, flexible name. And of course, Jahmyr Gibbs is always in your lineup. The Giants, by the way, the second best matchup for your running back. So if any week Montgomery's going to pop off one of these random 20-plus point games, it's probably this week. On the opposite side there with the New York Giants, it's a terrible matchup. Let's be so for real. Lions are the third worst matchup for your fantasy running backs. The Giants are really deploying both of their running backs very heavily, I would say, even in games where they're down, even in games where they're very competitive. For example, last week, Tracy saw 37 snaps, Singletary saw 35. Devin Singletary had 17 touches, Tyrone Tracy had 23. Now, obviously, Devin Singletary got into the end zone. You don't expect that each and every week. Tracy is the one that I would rely on more personally if I was going to start one of these two names. So I do view him as a spot start simply because I do think they slightly prefer him, and he is a weapon in the air. Devin Singletary is a much more risky start. I would say 95% of you guys definitely have a far better option. Let's go to the Vikings at the Packers. Low over under here, 41.5 points. The Packers are favored by almost 7 points. That does not bode well for the Minnesota Vikings offense. And these are two defenses that are really tough against the run. Two defenses that you ideally do not want to see in the schedule for your fantasy running backs. Let's talk about the Vikings here, though. Aaron Jones has completely, unquestionably, is that a word? I just made it up. Completely taken over the backfield in Minnesota. It's not even close. Again, I thought this would be more of a 1A, 1B with Jones and Mason. It's not even close. Last week, he dominated touches, dominated snaps. This week, Jordan Mason only had 9 snaps. Their fullback had more snaps, guys. Jordan Mason had 6 carries. That's it. But he ended up in the end zone. Great. So that was 60% of his fantasy points. But Aaron Jones is still by far their guy in this offense. 21 total touches. And unfortunately for Jordan Mason, it's just, I don't see this changing. You'll see for example, the offensive snaps here, since he joined the Vikings, you'll see this huge move up when Aaron Jones was out. And then obviously when Aaron Jones comes back, he's just completely irrelevant. 25 or less % of the snaps. This week was his lowest snap share of the entire year for the Vikings, so you cannot play him. Now, we do need to talk about Josh Jacobs because Josh Jacobs' knee is structurally sound, so there's no surgery required. He's not going to, have a season-ending injury or anything. He's actually labeled day-to-day, but could miss this game against the Vikings. Now, I would lean towards the side of Josh Jacobs not playing in this game, and with that being the potential result, Emmanuel Wilson is a legitimate, flexible name. He's not someone that's in my top 24 running back rankings. I'm not confidently playing him as my RB2, but if you're out there in a really tough spot, he's a part of a good offense in Green Bay. We know that, an offense that likes to run the ball. We've seen Emmanuel Wilson get into the end zone with these guys, and ultimately, he's a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 flexible option if you're in a tough spot. And the hope is with the spread being 6.5 points in favor of Green Bay in Green Bay, there will be plenty of opportunities for him to establish the run on the ground. Now, if Josh Jacobs is active, let's play through that scenario as well. Obviously, Josh Jacobs is a must start in that scenario, and you don't play Wilson or Brooks. You don't think about it. Now, here's what's difficult, I will say. I'll be honest with you guys. There's a little bit of a difficulty with Emmanuel Wilson. We have to recognize that. Matt LaFleur talked about Jaden Reed and Marshawn Lloyd. They might be designated to return from IR this week, and they feel like Lloyd is in a good spot right now. Now, I actually felt like Marshawn Lloyd coming out of college, he actually played at USC, and you might think this is helmet scouting. It's not. I feel like him and Woody Marks' game are very similar. They both came from USC in that system. They're both great pass catchers. They're both dynamic, explosive players. So if, and I don't think he will be, but if he is designated to return this week and he plays Marshawn Lloyd, things get much more complicated. So you need to pray that that doesn't happen if you're an Emmanuel Wilson owner. One of the best secret weapons in fantasy this year is the My Teams feature on the Flock Fantasy site. You can get that completely free, by the way. It doesn't cost anything. All you need to do is sign up with my promo code LAND for a free account, all right? And then you'll be able to see the My Teams feature, expert consensus, recent trades, etc. You can check that out in the pinned comment if you want to have some fun. And by the way, there's an easy way to ask me questions there through our website as well. Okay, let's go to the Colts at the Chiefs here. 49.5 point over under. Again, one of those three matchups that are tied for the second highest over-under of the week. The Chiefs are favored. They're at home. They're 5-5. They desperately need to win this game. I just don't see a scenario where the Chiefs don't win. Their backs are completely against the wall. They have got to win. They cannot go to 5-6 in the AFC. Now, if Kareem Hunt is the only guy in this backfield, then of course you can start him. In that scenario, he's my RB26. We would start him again as a flexible option, a low-end RB2, with some relative confidence. I mean, last week with no Isaiah Pacheco, he came out there, played the vast majority of the snaps, 56 snaps. Second was 12 with Brashard Smith. He had 15 total touches, and obviously he got into the end zone. So you saw that. They like to use him in short yardage situations. He's a good goal line back. So again, in the scenario where there's no Pacheco, I do believe you can start Kareem Hunt as a flexible option, low-end RB2. However, if Pacheco is active, I think this becomes a three-headed backfield. Again, it is way too messy. And in that scenario, I would suggest that over 96% of you guys have a better option at running back this week. It's just too risky. You have no idea who's going to get the touchdown. If anybody gets the touchdown, there might be no value in this backfield, point blank, period. On the opposite side there with the Colts, of course you're going to start Jonathan Taylor. What I will say is, if there's any week that he could bust, this has the makings of a bust, right? He's my RB4. I'm not saying he will, but he's in Kansas City. It's tough to run against this Chiefs defense, and this defense is motivated. This whole team is motivated. So I would not be shocked if we see some surprise game under 15 points, but you have to play him because he's on MVP form. Okay, next matchup we got here, Seahawks at Titans, 40.5 point over under. Definitely a lower over under this week. This is the second largest spread of the week in favor of the Seahawks. Even though it's in Tennessee, they're 12.5 point favorites. Let's start with those Seattle Seahawks. Heading to Tennessee, here's what I will say. When you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, the Titans are technically fourth. But in the last 5 to 6 weeks, they have really stepped it up as a defense. And a lot of their key players are playing much better. They're a tougher out than they were at the beginning of the year. So that's why I haven't labeled either Seahawks running back as a must start. Here's what I would say. If you're going to start one of them, I prefer it to be Ken Walker because he had a great day last week, right? Very effective, very efficient, explosive, still making those stupid plays where he runs back 15 yards to get 0. He does that way too often. But Mike McDonald, the head coach, mentioned, and they haven't really said this much this year, they've committed to the split backfield with Charbonnet, but this is the first week where he's come out and said, you know what, I think Ken is showing that he does deserve more opportunities. That is just words. Their actions so far have been, it is a complete split backfield, and we have to recognize that even in this last game against the Rams, it was still a split backfield, right? Ken Walker had the majority of the snaps, but it wasn't too far off. 16 versus 11 carries, 3 versus 2 targets. However, if you're going to start one of these guys, you probably lean Ken Walker because of those words. And if anything, if you're a Ken Walker owner, maybe there is light at the end of that tunnel. Charbonnet becomes a much riskier start, in my opinion, given this news. And then on the opposite side there with the Tennessee Titans, look, I can't in good consciousness tell any of you guys to start a Titans running back. They are completely splitting it down the middle. It is basically the same exact thing we've seen from the Seahawks this entire year, but their offense sucks. So they're never in scoring situations. There's never valuable touches. So for the vast majority of you guys, I would say do not start them. That Seahawks run defense is legit too. Okay, that brings us to the start of the afternoon slate of games. We've got the Jags at the Cardinals, 47.5 point over under. The Jags are favored by 2.5 points. Travis Etienne will remain a must start. Yes, it was awesome to see Bashul Tootin get more and more involved in the game plan last week. As a fellow Tootin truther, that was awesome to see. But still, Travis Etienne is their main running back. He still led them in snaps. He still got 21 touches. Again, great to see Tootin get those 15 touches. He did slightly injure his ankle, so we're not 100% sure what his role will be this week. But if he's healthy, you can play him as a Hail Mary at best, desperation play at best. I still trust Etienne in this backfield for now. But this might signal to you that if you can look for trades where you send away Etienne, and get a more reliable guy rest of season, maybe that triggers you to make those moves. Now with the Cardinals, everything is completely confusing every week for this backfield. Let's be so for real. Let me talk straight to you through the camera. It is very likely that the best move for you is to never start a Cardinals running back until Trey Benson is back. All right. One week it could be Michael Carter. One week it could be Amari DiMarcado. Bam Knight can have a good game. I've labeled both of those guys risky starts. DiMarcado had an injury, by the way, so I don't anticipate him to play this week. But in the event that Trey Benson is active, then I think you can play him as a low-end RB2 flex, high-end RB3, kind of middle ground like we've been talking about today. Because I do think he's by far the clear most talented running back in that backfield. But it's not a good matchup against the Jags. And ultimately, I don't think anyone can really predict on a weekly basis who's the running back to own. It is a hot hand right now without Trey Benson. Let's go to Browns at Raiders. The lowest over-under of the week, I believe, 37.5 points. It makes sense. Both of these offenses are terrible, okay? Awful. There's no doubt about it. The Browns, by the way, the worst matchup for your fantasy running back. Now, here's why I'm still going to label Ashton Jeanty a must-start, simply because it doesn't matter what game you're in. The Raiders have gone to this mode where they're going to feed Ashton Jeanty. Whether that's on the ground or in the air, he's going to be fed. For example, on Monday Night Football against the Cowboys, yes, they were down. They couldn't establish the run. He had 1 yard per carry because their offensive line is terrible, but he got 8 targets. He's had 5 or more targets every week since their bye. Versus Denver in week 10, he had 24 touches. Versus Jacksonville week 9, 18 touches, 5 of those being targets. So I understand there's always potential for a running back in Las Vegas with a terrible offense to bust, but still, because of the volume, he's still going to be my RB17 this week. And honestly, you can make the same exact case for Quinshon Judkins. The only problem with Judkins is he's not getting as much work through the air as Ashton Jeanty is. Still my RB14. I have him ranked higher than Jeanty because I like the matchup against the Raiders far better than I do against the Browns. So 2 rookies you can play, but obviously lower expectations. You're more happy if these guys give you their floor rather than their ceiling. Let's go to the Eagles at Cowboys. This is the largest over-under of the week. Eagles are favored by 4.5 points, even though it's in Dallas. Dallas looked pretty good on Monday Night Football. Now, there is an injury to the Eagles offensive line. That is Lane Johnson. He had a Liz Frank. He will be out 4 to 6 weeks. Will be interesting to see how that impacts the entire offense in Philadelphia, but still, Saquon Barkley is a must start. It's a great matchup against the Cowboys. We'll have to see how trends look in the next couple of weeks with Quinn and Williams being there, but still, you're going to start Saquon. They're heavy favorites, and obviously Saquon Barkley is Saquon Barkley. Now, on the opposite side there, Javonte Williams, another confident start for me. I would actually say at this point, the Cowboys offense looks better than the Eagles offense. It's a top 10 matchup for your running backs. The Eagles have been much better against the air attack than they have against the ground game. So I do anticipate Javonte Williams bouncing back and having a good game. Okay, let's go to Falcons at Saints. Obviously, the entire trajectory of this game completely changed when we had the news that there is an injury to Michael Penix. Now, that might sound silly, but it is true that Michael Penix really was running an effective offense, I guess you could say. And every time we've seen Kirk Cousins this year, it's been a nightmare. Here's what I'll say. Bijan Robinson, straight back into your lineups, no doubt about it. Over 30 points last week. We were begging people to remain patient on him in previous weeks where things were looking a little bit murky, but put him straight back into your lineup. He's going to get plenty of volume on the ground, in the air. I wouldn't start Tyler Algier unless you're in an absolute pinch. I do not project a lot of work for him in this game. On the opposite side, though, with the New Orleans Saints, Kamara is a spot start option. Last time out, Kamara finally was given a lot of opportunities both on the ground and in the air. So maybe the Saints are going to be more intentional about using him in their offense, but I would still be skeptical. I'm not sure which offense is going to be worse, but Kamara should see plenty of volume. The Falcons are the 7th best matchup for your running back, so you can throw him into your lineup if you're desperate, but throw up a prayer while you do so. Okay, Bucks at Rams, Sunday Night Football. This matchup is tied again with those 3 other games for the second largest over-under of the week. The Rams are favored by almost a touchdown in Los Angeles. Oh my gosh, I so desperately need Bucky Irving back. For the love of God, please, Bucky, I need you back into my lineups. Here's the good news. Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin will be worked more into practice this week. That's according to Todd Bowles. So there is at least light at the end of the tunnel. You saw him practice last week. Hopefully he gets in a full practice this week, and then we will be completely wheels up to the moon. Now, assuming Bucky starts, he's my RB11. I know it's a terrible matchup, but you start Bucky Irving if he's out there. Trust me. Now, if Rachaad White is the RB2, which is what I would anticipate, he's a better pass catcher than Sean Tucker, even though Sean Tucker was great last week, no doubt about it, then he would be my RB30. Much more of a desperation play than a confident play. But in the event that Bucky Irving is out, I do believe you should start Sean Tucker over Rachaad White. Why? Because I believe Sean Tucker takes the Bucky Irving role. He'll be their early down guy. You even saw that last week against the Buffalo Bills. One of the best parts about the entire Tampa Bay Bucs offense was Sean Tucker and what he was doing on early downs. He had 19 carries compared to just 10 for Rachaad White. So even though Rachaad White was out there more often, that was more because this team was down and, late in the game needing to throw the ball. Now, Rachaad White is a far superior pass catcher than Sean Tucker. But I will say that we are starting to see Sean Tucker really eat into this role. On early downs, he was the guy you can see in that dark green there. On goal line work, they gave him opportunities. Short yardage, he had opportunities. But again, on the third downs, the 2-minute drills where they needed to throw, Rachaad White is going to be the guy. That's why I think if Bucky is out, you can play Sean Tucker. But if Bucky's playing, Sean Tucker's not a playable name, even though he had 30 points. If you don't believe me, go back to the last time he had 30 points against the Saints a couple years ago. He became irrelevant not too long after that, okay? All right, Kyren Williams is a must start. We don't need to talk about that too heavily. Bucks are a great matchup, and, Blake Corum is annoying to the Kyren Williams owners, but it's still Kyren Williams' backfield. All right, I got a feeling this week about these 6 players, so I'm putting them into my DFS lineup. We're talking Bucky Irving. I'm speaking it into the faith that he's back. If he's not, I'll change this. Devonta Smith against Dallas should have a big game. I think Judkins bounces back against the Raiders. I love putting Ramondre Stevenson in these because I know we're all loving Henderson, but against Cincinnati, I think he's sneaky. And then Worthy and Adams kind of round out the roster there. Look, you can create your own lineup, by the way. All you got to do is choose 6 non-quarterbacks. Download the FastDraft app, use my promo code LAND, I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you'll get my weekly rankings completely free. Make your lineup, unique though. Okay, you don't want to copy mine because then none of us are going to win money. You want to make it unique. You want to think outside the box, but you can definitely have a bunch of fun if you want. Check out the pinned comment down below if you want to join me. Last game of the day, Monday Night Football. We've got the Panthers at the 49ers, and it's a high over under. Honestly, I think this matchup is very easy to analyze. You start Rico Dowdle and you expect big things. You start Christian McCaffrey and you expect big things. Rico Dowdle, even in games where he doesn't get a touchdown now, has been a reliable fantasy football weapon. That's a sign that tells you he's a must start every single week. For example, in this game against the Falcons, he didn't get a touchdown, but he was still out there for the vast majority of the snaps. He still had 25 touches and 6 of those were targets. So he's still a reliable option regardless of the outcome. For Christian McCaffrey, do you really want me to analyze Christian McCaffrey? Put him into your lineup and reap the rewards. Congratulations if you drafted him. Guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. Wide receiver video will be out later today, so make sure you've got those notifications on, and I'll see you guys very soon. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.